The little thing in the corner of the screen says it's showtime. So who am I to flaunt the authority of the little thing in the corner of the screen? It's actually right up in that corner. It says, "Hey, it's showtime. You scheduled this for 8:30, so you better start talking." And I guess I will oblige. It's the Panther-Lair Show here on a Wednesday night. What is this, October 11th? So we got that going for us. We're moving quickly toward the middle of the month of October. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the best source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Everything you need Pitt. Everything you need in terms of Pitt news is right there at Panther-Lair.com, and of course, message boards where you can hang out with other Pitt fans all day, every day, talking to other Pitt fans about whatever's going on in the world of Pitt sports. The message boards are always active. My dog is whining in the background. If you hear him, I apologize for that, but he'll be tended to shortly, so he can just calm down over there. It's always good to have that ambient noise. I don't know if the microphone picks it up or not. Sometimes it does when the dog is right under my desk and shaking, but other times it might be far enough away that it might not pick up. But anyway, we'll be joined by Jim Hammett here in a couple minutes, just as we get the conversation going for this hour of Pitt talk coming out of the bye week. Pitt heading into effectively the second half of the season, even though there's 7 games left on a 12-game schedule. We're going to call it the second half. I've been calling it the second half all week. And I've been calling it that here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have the morning Pitt videos that we do every day of the week. A little bit of Pitt sports talk to start your day, Monday through Friday. And then we have this live show that we do every Wednesday night. We have the post-game show that we do after the games on the weekends. Josh Newark wants to know if I am beating my dog, and I don't think that's a euphemism. I'm not beating my dog. He's just whining a little bit in the background. But as I said, he'll be tended to shortly. Look, not to get too far in the weeds about this, but I couldn't let him out beforehand because I thought there was a bobcat in the backyard, all right? I didn't want to let the dogs outside when I thought there was a bobcat out there. But after further inspection, we don't think it was actually a bobcat because the tail was too long. But it had the ears, man, and it was just staring at us like it was going to be a problem. But we don't think it was a bobcat. We think it was just a regular cat, so I could have let the dogs out. And now I think they're being tended to. But I digress. Long-winded way of saying welcome to the show. Don't forget, we'll have the live post-game show on Saturday night after the Louisville game. I'm not sure what time. It's a 6:30 game. Guessing we'll start the post-game around 11:30 or midnight. We'll talk about that game for an hour. All right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And if you want to make sure you don't miss it, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Let's bring him in now. Our good friend, Jim Hammett. Jim, you do get to be part of the show. It's not just going to be me talking about bobcats. Have you ever seen a bobcat, Jim?
See, I think I did once. I have a lot of stuff in my yard. I live pretty close to like a lot of woods. So I have all these kind of tracks in the backyard.
Okay. Well, see, Josh Newark asked, like, oh, you got bobcats in the South Hills? I think we do actually have bobcats. Like, there've been sightings. There've been coyotes. There've been bobcats. I mean, I think there are. I think this is a real thing. And this cat, it was just sitting there, like, staring at us on the sidewalk as we drove up. It just had, like, it really, like, different looking kind of ears, but it might have been on high alert. But it had a really long tail. I think bobcats have the short tail. So I don't think this was actually a bobcat. I didn't want to send my dogs out in the backyard. Could have been a vicious fight, you know. There's 2 of them and 1 of him, but if he's a real bobcat, I think they're probably pretty mean, right? I mean,
I think so. I mean, teams use them as their mascot. I mean, they're supposed to be ferocious.
Right. Like when I was growing up, my high school, we were the Blue Jays, well known as the most vicious of all birds. I mean, right up there with the Cardinals and the Orioles in terms of just vicious avian creatures. But I digress, Jim. Coming out of the bye week here, heading into the second half of the season, I think you wrote an article, you did on Sunday, the 5 storylines for the second half. So you're comfortable calling it the second half of the season, even though they have 7 games to go on a 12-game schedule. You're okay with just colloquially referring to this as the second half?
Yeah, I don't think you and I planned that we were calling it the second half, but we both just started doing it at the same time. So I think we're good with calling this the second half of the season.
It lined up well. The off week, changing quarterbacks. I mean, 5-7. That's pretty close to 6-6 as far as like splitting the season in half. It does feel like there was a little bit of a break there. We can go down this road about as far as the schedule of the 7 games remaining. I look at it and I sort of see it divided into tiers because my first glance when I look at it, I'm like, oh, this is really tough. This is a tough stretch of games. But I kind of divide it up. I mean, I think you've got, as it looks right now, how teams have played so far. I think you've got Florida State and Louisville. I don't think those two teams are on the same level as each other, but in terms of Pitt's schedule, they're and you can interject at any point here if you disagree. I think those are the toughest teams left on the schedule, the way they look right now. I think there's a middle tier that is like Notre Dame, Duke, probably those two. And then there's the bottom tier that I think is Wake Forest, Syracuse, Boston College. And again, not that all three of those teams are equally bad, but I think they're all pretty suspect right now. They've all shown warts to varying degrees. I mean, Wake Forest is 3-2, but they, got outscored in their last two games. Syracuse in the last two games got outscored like 71-21. Wake Forest doesn't really look that good. I don't think this season, even when they've won games. So I kind of see it divided up into those three tiers. And when I say it that way, it doesn't seem quite as challenging, aside from the fact that they've got like two top 15 teams on the schedule. Do you split it up like that? And what's your overall take on these final, remaining 7 games?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably fair to say Louisville and Florida State are probably their toughest games. I mean, that Louisville-Notre Dame game, that was one of the games I watched this weekend. They looked really good. I mean, their defense was flying around, making plays. And I mean, it's surprising to me that Jeff Brom has them rolling right away, but they look good. I mean, they really do. And Duke's going to be tough, but both them and Notre Dame, they play a style of football where they're not going to like overwhelm you and beat you like 56-0 with all this like high fancy throwing the ball and crazy things like that. So there's a path where like that seems more plausible, beating those two teams more so than Florida State right now. Then I agree with those bottom three. I mean, Boston College is, that could be the deciding game. Who's the worst team in the ACC this year? Pitt and Boston College.
I wonder, does Boston College play Virginia? Because they're in that conversation. Oh, they already did. Oh, and Virginia won that game, right? Or no, Boston College won that game. I know Boston College.
It was a forgettable game. It was 27-24. Boston College won.
Oh, okay. Wait, isn't that the score? Oh, okay. For some reason, I didn't think they had. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that game now. That's right. Okay, because I was like, wait, 27-24, that was the score against Army, but it was they actually had 27-24 games back to back.
Consistent.
That's right. Yeah. So Virginia, I mean, like there's a bottom of this conference right now, and it's Pitt, it's Virginia, and it's Boston College. Pitt and Virginia don't face each other, but I think Boston College can firmly put themselves third to last if they can beat Pitt, later in the season. Unfortunately, Virginia and Pitt will never be able to settle that one between them. But I mean, yeah, Boston College doesn't look good. Although their quarterback, Castellanos, is pretty. I mean, he had 4 rushing touchdowns against Army. I mean, he's I think he's the 3rd leading rusher in the ACC right now. I mean, he's a bit of a playmaker. He's not a great passer. At least he's not been very productive passing, but he's throwing the ball well, or he's running the ball well. With Duke, the Riley Leonard injury is the big question mark there. I think Mike Elko said he's still day to day, but he's quote positive about the rest of the season. I mean, if it's a high ankle sprain, like it's been reported, that doesn't exactly heal quickly, and they had an off week after the Notre Dame game, but that can take a little while. So, Duke in the finale, I mean, that's the longest amount of time Leonard could possibly have to get healthy. So presumably that'll be the healthiest he is for the rest of the season, which is not good for Pitt. But I don't know. With Pitt, it comes down to, all these games, as we look at them, we're like, oh, Wake Forest, Boston College, Syracuse. Those are the worst teams left on the schedule. Notre Dame and Duke look like they could be vulnerable, maybe games that you could have a chance in. But Pitt actually has to show some improvement. And that's the thing we just haven't seen through 5 games. And I think there's probably, and we could probably break it down into different sides, the defense and the offense. What's your level of optimism of improvement on each of those sides of the ball? I think I can probably guess your answer, but what's your level of optimism of improvement on those two sides of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about it all along. And, when we're kind of breaking down the second half of the season, I focus more on Pitt because we could talk about the schedule, but they have so many things they need to work on internally. It doesn't matter who the opponent is right now. So, I mean, I think I'm pretty optimistic that the defense will get better, and I don't think it's as bad as some may think it has been. I think they've been on the raw end of some turnover, fast change situations, field position, a lot of things working against them. But I mean, I like the upside of the young linebackers. We've talked a lot about them. I wrote about Braylon Lovelace today. I mean, I think Donovan McMillan's really coming to his own. So, I mean, I think the defense has some good performances ahead of them. I still don't know what to expect from the offense because we haven't seen the quarterback really play much. I mean, I was having a conversation earlier today. I mean, we're talking about Penn State Rutgers game 2 years ago, the first half against Wofford and the first half against North Carolina. That's all we have to really go off of when we're talking about Christian Veillere, which I think he confirmed today is how you say it. I don't know.
He did. I think you have to put the emphasis on the Vey. So it's like Ver. There. It's almost it's almost one syllable, but you get a little bit of a Y sound, sound in the middle, like there.
Have you ever heard of like father and son just disagree about how to say the name?
Somebody's doing a bit here. Like somebody
I don't know.
is like joking on all of us. Like somebody is just sitting back and laughing like crazy. They're like, look at these idiots. And not just about us right here on this live stream, but just in general, everything that's been talked about this week. Somebody is just cracking up. And I don't know if it's Christian or Martin. I like that somebody on the message board asked if Christian Veillere's father, Martin Veilleux, pronounces his first name Martin, like Martin Brodeur, or if he pronounces it Martin, which I thought was a great question. I mean, and actually, we should ask him how he pronounces his first name, and then ask Christian how he pronounces his dad's first name, and maybe we can get different answers on that one too. One will say Martin, and one will say Martin. I mean, I think there's, But anyway, I asked Bostic, Pat Bostic on Monday. I'm like, so how are you going to say it? Because this was before we got a chance to talk to Christian today, and he was like, I'm just going to say Christian. He's like, I'm not even gonna. He's like, I might occasionally call him 11. I might call him the quarterback. I might just say Christian, but I'm not even going to get into the last name. But look, if the kid himself says, I want it to be pronounced Bear, then it gets pronounced Bear. I don't know. We'll see what Joe DeStio does over the PA at Heinz Field or at Acrisure on Saturday. But maybe he should just go back and forth. I tried to do a thing once where with PJ Philip O'Brien, I would refer to him PJ, and then the next time I mentioned him, I refer to him as Philip, and I would just kind of bounce. I think it was him that I did that with. There was somebody that I just bounced back and forth to appease everyone because he kept changing. Anyway, we're really sidetracked here.
Yeah, that's
Pitt's defense. I think Deion Hayes is on the verge. I could say I probably have said this before because I've been thinking it for a couple of weeks. I could see him having one or two like multi-sack games and ending up. We might have talked about this with Noah last week when we were talking about the over-unders on Deion Hayes sacks. I think we set the number like 8.5 or something like that. And I was saying that he's only got 2 through 5 games, but I could see him kind of just breaking out because, and I wrote this somewhere, I think he's like 15th nationally among Power 5 edge rushers in pressures, according to Pro Football Focus, and like 3rd or 5th in the ACC among edge rushers in pressures. So he's getting there. He's getting into the backfield. He's getting into the quarterback. He's impacting it that way. He's just not finishing the play. And I'd much rather have the guy who can get there and work with him on fundamentals on how to finish the play than try to teach a guy how to get around a tackle and how to get into the backfield, how to get a pass rush win. I don't want to draw the ire of Steelers media by talking about pass rush win rates, but give me that guy who's getting there and I can work with him on tackling and wrapping him up and fundamentals, rather than trying to teach a guy how to actually pass rush. He's winning those battles at the line of scrimmage. He's just got to finish. And I think he will. I don't know if it'll be this week. I don't know when it'll be. Sam Hartman got sacked like 5 times against Louisville, so maybe that's a good time. I mean, this defense has some familiarity with getting after Sam Hartman, but I think he's going to blow up, and I think he'll get a handful. I think they'll come in bunches, and I think when they do, this defense is going to start looking better, particularly in defending the pass.
Yeah, I agree, and I've seen some encouraging signs with the pass rush. I mean, I think Van Breem is actually playing all right, and he actually got, like, whether the depth chart means anything at all. I mean, now he's listed as the starter over Nate Temple. So, I mean, that kind of started to happen on the field anyway. I think DeAndre Jules is actually having a pretty good season. Like, all that like camp hype, it's like it was kind of warranted. I mean, he's getting in the backfield, he's making plays. So if they can get Jules and Hayes working off each other, I think they have something there. Then and that's wherever you can kind of start bringing in the younger guys like Sean Fitzsimmons and all those guys, Nakai Johnson and whoever. But like, I think those two need to be the ones to make the plays. And for the most part, like you said, Hayes is getting there, but Jules is actually finishing. So, I mean, there has been some improvement on the defensive line. I mean, that Virginia Tech game was just so weird. It's because like they just couldn't get off the field and they were just they had to be on the field so much. It's not like they played poorly. They were making good plays. It's just like they would have a dumb penalty and miss a tackle and they'd be stuck out there for another 5 minutes.
Yeah, missing tackles was the biggest issue because all those stats I had about Deion Hayes, he also leads the ACC among edge rushers in missed tackles. He had a big problem with that, and they were facing a unique guy. I mean, Kyron Drones was a unique kind of quarterback. You're not going to face a guy like that probably the rest of the way. You'll face mobile quarterbacks, but not a guy who's sort of built like him, who can shed tackles the way he could. And to your point about Bam Brima, just kind of according to Pro Football Focus, he played 20 more snaps than Nate Temple did at Virginia Tech, which, I mean, yeah, keep that going. I mean, there's no reason not to continue trending in that direction. Hopefully somebody like Nakai Johnson or Sam Okunlola can step up. But I mean, it's going to be Hayes and Brima playing a lot, as it should be, because, Charlie Partridge, as much as he wants to rotate, when it got down to it in 2020, like Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver were playing a ton of snaps. You know what I mean? They would play, and he's talked about that. He's like, when I get to the fourth quarter, like the guys who I can count on, the guys who are going to make plays, those are the guys I'm putting on the field. I want to rotate, but I got to have the guys out there who are going to win. And if that's Hayes and Brima, then those guys are going to play a lot. You'd like to see somebody else step up. Probably Okunlola would be the most likely candidate, would be my guess. But it's got to be those two older guys, those two seniors, Brima and Hayes, have to be the ones making the plays this week. And we'll come back to more defense and offense questions, but I'm curious about Louisville. And you mentioned you watched the Louisville Notre Dame game. What concerns you more with that team, the offense or the defense? Because the offense is the ACC's leading rusher. Jack Plummer, the quarterback, has thrown a bunch of touchdown passes, but their defense sacked Sam Hartman 5 times. They got 3 picks, I think a couple fumbles. Defense looks pretty stout. So what, as it comes to matching up with Pitt, what concerns you more there?
I mean, I think it would have to be Louisville's defense, just because you don't know what Pitt's going to do on offense. I mean, the way they played against Notre Dame, it's like it's not like Notre Dame is has great players up and down the field. They were kind of hoping Sam Hartman would fix everything. And I mean, I think he's a good player, but I think they're realizing they have more issues than they realized than just a quarterback. But I mean, Louisville looked really good. And again, you're talking about an offensive line that's jumbled again. I mean, I don't think Pitt knows, or we know, if Jay Cradle's going to play this weekend. I'm guessing he's not. I mean, so then again, I mean, it's Ryan Baer's like 3rd career start against who's the Louisville defensive end? He's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, you're going to have matchups like that going up against a quarterback making his first start. That's troubling. I mean, I think the way Pitt's offense has played this year, any defense has been a struggle. But I mean, this is actually a good defense, probably the best one they've seen to this point.
Yeah, and that's absolutely a concern. You're right. And but then on the flip side, you've got Jeff Brom over there calling plays for Louisville, and he's really good. I heard Pat Narduzzi on his radio show tonight talking about how many trick plays Louisville runs. They run so many trick plays. He said, we probably spent more time working on trick plays this week than any other week in the past, which, oh, good God. I mean, if you spend a lot of time working on trick play, I know you got to be prepared for them, but you probably also need to be prepared for things like, I don't know, toss plays, perimeter runs and all those things that kind of killed you against Virginia Tech. Brom is just I think he's one of these guys that just is really good at anticipating what a defense is going to do. It's not like Pitt's defense is, I don't think Pitt's defense is all that hard to anticipate, what they're going to do. You know who they are, what they do. They're not going to change anything up or do anything drastically different. So you give a good offensive coach like Jeff Brom a chance to prepare against a defense that pretty much keeps it the same game in, game out. I get worried about that. And then, and it's a defense that is dealing with personnel issues. It's dealing with inexperience and youth and still trying to develop guys. And they're going to run a lot of motion at Pitt and try and get them all over the place. And I think young linebackers can get caught up and lost in those things. It's tough. It's tough. Has this game gotten to the point for you, Jim, where Louisville is riding so high and Pitt is so low that this is ripe for a Pitt classic? A total upset. These things don't usually happen like in the midst of a really down stretch, like 1-4 this early in the season. Usually it's the finale or like final like quarter of the season, final third of the season. But has this game reached that status yet? What do they call it? The super weapon. Is this a super weapon game lining up because of Louisville jumping 11 spots in the polls? They beat Notre Dame. They've got all this stuff going for them. We're talking right now about how it's an impossible game to win. It's going to be impossible to score in Louisville. It's going to be impossible to stop them. Has this game, is it there yet? Or do we need to wait until later down the road? Florida State.
I don't know if it's quite there yet because I'm not sure if Louisville is actually the 14th best team in the country. I mean, they deserve their ranking where they are right now, but I'm guessing they're going to regress a little bit. I mean, I don't think anyone really expected Louisville to just come in and be this great all of a sudden, but I'm looking at their schedule. I mean, they have 3 of their next 4 games are Pitt, Virginia Tech, and Virginia, and maybe Riley Leonard-less Duke. Right. So maybe Louisville is actually primed to keep this thing rolling. But I think there's ways you could talk yourself into this game for Pitt. I mean, I think just having that bye week, that extra time to prepare, I guess that's you always hear that from coaches and teams. And I don't know how much of a thing it really is. I mean, I think it helps people get healthy and kind of refresh themselves a little bit. But the one stat like I take away is Plummer is not overly mobile. I think he's been sacked 11 or 12 times. So we just talked about Dayon Hayes needing to finish tackles. I mean, I think if you can get to him, I think he's not going to be like Drones from Virginia Tech where he's just going to bounce off of you. I mean, if you get to him, he's going to go down. So, I mean, I think that's going to be Pitt's plan. Whether that's effective or not, because they are going to throw all those motions at him. Jordan's one of the best running backs in the league. But, I mean, if you could just really get after him and play Pitt football like they know how to play. I mean, they're known for sacking the quarterback. If they can do that a bunch, then maybe, I guess.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you talk about, like, I don't know if Louisville is the 14th best team in the country. I mean, they got a huge bump for beating Notre Dame. But if you switch the schedule around a little bit, if you, like, took this Louisville game and put it, like, 4 games from now after Notre Dame plays Southern Cal and Clemson, and Notre Dame has 4 losses, I don't think Louisville gets nearly the bump out of beating Notre Dame. You know what I mean? I think Notre Dame is going to lose at least 3 games, if not 4 this year. So Louisville's getting a big boost out of winning that game, but we may look back and be like, that wasn't quite – it might feel a little bit – do you remember when Pitt beat Notre Dame in 2009? They end up moving into like the top 10 in the BCS rankings before they lost to Cincinnati. They lost to West Virginia and then Cincinnati, but like, it was like, oh, they beat Notre Dame. That's a huge that wasn't that good of a Notre Dame team. They had some issues and some coaching problems. And I think this year's Notre Dame team sort of feels the same way. So Louisville might not, they may or may not be the 14th best team. And, like you say, if they can get to Plummer, but if they can't stop Jordan, if they can't stop the running game, I mean, it's kind of over. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of over.
I mean, the thing with Louisville is like we're riding high on them right now because they look so good against Notre Dame. But the week before that NC State Louisville game, that wasn't very good. It's not like you came away thinking like, oh wow, Louisville's great, and they skated by Indiana, barely beat Georgia Tech. So I mean, we're thinking they're great because they're playing Notre Dame, and we're also just probably down on Pitt because there's every reason to be down on Pitt, but at the beginning of the year, this wasn't supposed to be one of their toughest games. It really wasn't.
No, it wasn't. You're right. And it's true that after the NC State game, I actually put out a tweet. Now, this was before Pitt played Virginia Tech. And I was like, Louisville, it's only one game, but they sure look like they're one of the winnable games on Pitt's schedule. I mean, because it was like, and it was sort of the same thing that happened to Notre Dame, where like as the level of competition went up, they started looking not quite as impressive as they had earlier in the season. But then you put 2 of those teams together, and one of them had to win. So yeah, maybe we're overhyping Louisville. That's it, Jim. They're overhyped. They're not that good. It's the ACC's leading rusher, but I mean, anybody can be the ACC's leading rusher. We're only 5 games into the season. I mean, I mean, like small sample size of being the ACC's lead. Boston College's quarterback is third leading rusher in the ACC. Let's not get too worked up about a guy leading the conference in rushing. And like you mentioned, Plummer, I'm looking at his numbers. Somebody, Randy Bates or somebody was like, he's elusive. I mean, he had one game where he had minus 42 yards rushing or minus 21 yards rushing. I mean, like, get out of here. Yeah, I think this will be fine. Jamari Thrash. I mean, yeah, he's a good receiver, but I mean, it's not that. I mean, yeah, I like it, Jim. Now, but you see what we're doing, though? We're talking ourselves into a win, and they're going to go out and get trounced because all of a sudden, I think part of the key is you have to enter a game with absolutely no confidence whatsoever. Like prior to the Clemson game in 2016, I remember walking out after one of the Thursday media sessions, walking with I forgot who even covered the team at that point, Batco probably, Alan Saunders. And I was like, guys, I remember, it's funny. I was like, I remember the West Virginia game in 2007. They're 28-point underdogs then. And I just remember it was guaranteed. I remember talking to other people like, no, they have no chance of winning. I was like, and that was the last time I felt this certain that they had no chance at all of winning. I was like, so maybe it's possible they pull it off here. And it was like, pause. And then everybody was just like, no, they have no chance. They have no chance against Clemson. I think it has to be a 0% of confidence in order for that magical thing to happen. You know what I mean? Miami at the end of 2017, I don't think anybody thought they were going to win that game. The Clemson game, the West Virginia game in 2007. So now we're talking them up and talking up their chances and talking down Louisville. We've just doomed it, Jim. You realize that? I mean,
well, yeah. The question started is this the super weapon game? I mean, I think that's more reserved for Florida State because that's the game they absolutely.
That's right.
They have no chance of beating Florida State.
That's a good point. This one they'll just lose. But yeah, and then they'll. But you see, I like when somebody presented the scenario before the season. They're like, "Yep, this is what's going to happen. Florida State's going to be like 8-0 or top 4 in the country, and then they'll lose to a 4-4 Pitt team." But the thing is, Pitt has to win 3 in a row to be that 4-4 Pitt team. So they'll have a little bit of hype or at least a little bit of momentum rolling into that game. But as we're talking about, it's Louisville, Wake Forest, and Notre Dame. They're all beatable teams, I guess. I don't know. All right, I want to get a couple questions here. Byron Fleck was the super chatter right off the bat. He says, the transfer portal opens in early December. What are you hearing about Pitt players going into the portal, and how many do you expect to sign from the portal? I can't answer that question at all. I have no idea how many are going to leave, how many they're going to end up signing. I bet you'll see anywhere from 3 to 6 transfers coming in, maybe 7 transfers coming in. Just because that's probably what you should expect. The biggest question, and I think we talked about this a little bit last week, the biggest question is going to be whether they need to and do pursue a quarterback, right? And if you're the Pitt staff, you don't have an answer on that yet, do you? I mean, you're waiting to see what happens over these 7 games to make that decision, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly clear. I mean, you could still maybe think about going for a quarterback, but depends what level of quarterback you're going. Are you going for a guy that's absolutely going to start next year? Or are you adding a guy to add into the room? I mean, that's one way of looking at it. But to answer the broader question, there's no way to know right now who's leaving the program, who's going to transfer. And I mean, there's some certain positions you can look at the roster right now where you could say, all right, those guys might leave and they need to add a few guys there.
I brought this up on the message boards. It was in a thread, and so I don't know if it really got the discussion, the level of discussion that it could. But I think it's an interesting topic. Let's say you go into the offseason, or you're headed toward the offseason. You decide you do need to transfer a quarterback. You also decide you're going to change the offensive coordinator. What's the ideal timeline to get both of those things done quickly and done in such a way that you get a coordinator and a quarterback that mesh? Because we've seen Pat Narduzzi takes his time with these coordinator hires, right? I don't think any of them have ever really happened quickly. They've gone, fired or lost a guy at the beginning of December and not hired a guy until the end of the month or early January. I mean, he's gone a long time in the past. It doesn't feel like he can afford that because you need to get, if you're also intending to get a transfer quarterback, right? So if it was you, how would you approach it? If you're going to make the move with the coordinator and you feel like you need a transfer quarterback, what's the timeline? What would be the most ideal way to work that out?
Well, I'm thinking this year because in the past, the last time he fired a coordinator was Sean Watson, and that happened after the Sun Bowl, They're not going to a bowl game this year. So you could get that process started right away. Like when the season ends with November 25th or whatever.
Yeah.
That Monday morning, you might be looking for a new coordinator and you have a head start. And at that point, then everyone's still going through the bowls. Not everyone's jumping into the portal just yet. So you can theoretically get your coordinator first, then a quarterback, because I think that's what happened last year. I mean, they were just so worried about getting Keaton Slovis. They wanted a quarterback. They thought he was the splash quarterback they needed, that it just didn't work out. They never meshed together. And so I think, ideally in a perfect world, you want your coordinator picking the quarterback, not a quarterback already in place. Then you hire a coordinator.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I wonder, crazy scenario, they win 5 games here. They go 5-2, right? If you're going to make, and I mean, I think we all can sort of agree that a change of the offensive coordinator, it's on the table. I don't know what Panther-Lair is going to do. I don't ever really like to advocate for people to lose their jobs, but I think we can all agree that it's at least on the table when the offense has performed the way it has over the last 18 games. Let's say they crazy stuff happens. It's not from scoring a ton of points, but somehow they go 5-2 over these final 7 games. They get to a bowl. Would you make a change prior to the bowl game, prior to bowl prep? Or are you waiting it out until, after the Motor City Bowl on December 23rd or whatever it is?
It's hard to say because, I mean, like if you get 5 wins, that means the quarterback probably played half decent. And it's, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
Do you want to let him keep working with him through? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm just probably playing the odds thinking they're not going to a bowl game right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it seems highly unlikely to see. I mean, like winning 5 in a row to end last year was one thing. Winning 5 out of 7 to end this year would be something. I mean, I just don't think you see teams typically that are that bipolar to play the way they have through the first 5 and then play a completely different way or far more effective way through the final 7. But I don't know. It just feels to me like if Panther-Lair is going to make a change, he's got to make it much more quickly. He's got to act with a lot more urgency than he has in the past. You know what I mean? Like I think it's got to happen a lot quicker. Bill Florigan says, will Frank Cignetti let Christian Bear actually play, or we call a Western Michigan, West Virginia style basic offense? What's the point in playing him if we can't see what he's got? Jim, what do you think? How do you approach it if you're the OC?
I mean, they're gonna protect him somewhat. I mean, you're not just gonna let. Louisville's a great pass rush. I mean, you're not just gonna drop him back 35 times and just let's see what he's got. I mean, you got to play to your strengths and still try to win the football game. I know you're trying to evaluate what he can do as a quarterback, but I mean, when Narduzzi was asked about it on Monday, he said this move was made for right now. Like we're still going to try to win football games. So they still have to come up with a game plan where that it protects Christian Bear. They still need to be able to establish the run. And yeah, it's probably going to be a Western Michigan basic offensive attack. I mean, I think that's they're going to try to possess the ball, try to give him easy throws, try to run the ball, and try to win the game. I mean, I think that's their best approach to win the game. So I don't think airing him out 35 times is going to improve Pitt's chances, even if it does give us a better look at him.
Yeah, and there's not, there's not something inherently wrong with the approach to the West Virginia game. The issue with the approach to the West Virginia game is that the quarterback was so bad. The quarterback threw 3 interceptions. The problem with the approach in the Virginia Tech game was that he completed 5 passes in the first 54 minutes. I mean, this was the issue. It wasn't, I don't think it was the approach or the game plan or what they were trying to do. I think that's fine. If you can just get average quarterback play, I think you can probably win that way, because Virginia Tech had like 19 guys, within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. I mean, they were doing everything they could to stop the run because they weren't scared of the pass whatsoever. If you can just complete some simple passes just to loosen them up, it doesn't have to all be play action bombs to Bub Means, but just simple passes to loosen them up. I think you can then get your running game going. You can start to have some success there, and you can play it kind of conservative. You can try to win possession, keep your defense off the field, and give yourself a chance in that way. You just have to there's something to be said, and I keep getting this phrase keeps getting inside my head of just average quarterback play. Like, just don't be bad. Don't be terrible. Just be average. And I don't know what average equates to. I was looking at Power 5 quarterbacks, like maybe around 63% is kind of the middle range of completion percentage. If you could get around that number, I think Phil Dracovic, I sort of did some very poorly done, projections if he completed 63% of his passes this season and just kind of added this number and that number. And it's something that anyone who actually knows anything about stats would, they would say I'm speaking Japanese and making their skin crawl. But roughly, I could project him out like if he just played average, that's 63% completion, probably about like 1,100 yards, maybe get him up to around 9 touchdowns, which again is just average for Power 5 quarterbacks with the amount of dropbacks that he's had this season. And if he could do that, if he was around 9 touchdowns so far this year, I think you can make a case that they probably are 3-2 at worst and 4-1, potentially. If he's thrown for 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns, and it's all just, again, average quarterback play. Just don't suck, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Cincinnati game, he was 10 of 32. At 14 completions wins that game.
Yeah,
it's like that small of a line.
I know. Like 63% in that game with 32 attempts would have been 20 completions. West Virginia game, 13 of 20 would have been 63%. Virginia Tech, he attempted 22 passes. 63% completion would be 14 completions. They're just asking you not to be terrible. And I think that's all they're really going to ask, at least in the early going, that's all they're really going to ask Christian Baer to do is just don't be terrible. Just be average. And he's somebody who's never just average, who's always above average, of course, is our friend Chris Gates. And the Wednesday Panther-Lair Live Show, it's sponsored by Chris Gates Fitness. If you have a health or fitness goal and you need help achieving it, you go to chrisgatesfitness.com to learn more about how online fitness coaching works and how you can benefit from working with Chris. Now, Chris will work together with you to create a fully personalized exercise program, pair it with a customized nutritional strategy that works you towards your goals. He'll be there every step of the way to support you through the process. Whether you want to build muscle, burn fat, develop more functional strength, train for a sport or event, or just generally develop healthier lifestyle habits, online coaching is one of the fastest and most efficient ways to get you from where you are now to where you want to go. And Chris loves working with fellow Pitt fans. He's a diehard Panther fan and a subscriber to both the Panther-Lair podcast and Panther-Lair.com. So learn more at chrisgatesfitness.com. Be sure to mention Panther-Lair when you apply. chrisgatesfitness.com. All right, lots of comments and questions in here. Josh Newark started off right at the very beginning, said 2 questions. One, and wow, we made it 38 minutes without talking about the blue vase, Jim. 38 minutes.
Base gate.
Pretty good. Josh asks 2 questions. 1, blue vase or blue urn? 2, are you team Noah or team Carlo? Yes, both are friends of the show, but pick a side. All right. I mean, it's clearly a vase, right? Blue vase. What?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. Before we even do this, before we even answer Josh's questions, I sometimes wonder with something like this, are we niche enough and hyper specific enough that we can just assume that the viewership and listenership knows what we're talking about? Or do we need to set the table? I mean, I'm all for setting the table. I could eat up 2.5 minutes, to get us closer to 9:30 just by setting the table of what we're talking about here. What would you assume? What percentage of the people either, watching live or listening to or watching this tomorrow, what percentage do you think know what we're talking about if we say the blue vase?
Not as many. Maybe 60-40 people know. Maybe 40 people or 40% of people kind of don't really know exactly what we're talking about.
The second comment was another one. I need vase answers from PG Jeans. So, I mean, 2 people right off the bat, very beginning, first comments are.
All right. So are you going to do the 2
Okay.
minutes?
Well, I've already used that. Oh, it's still 9:09. Darn it. When I said I could take 2 minutes off the clock, I looked up and it was 9:09. It's still 9:09. Damn. So, and I noticed this yesterday. In the facility in the South Side. There's a blue vase on a pedestal right inside the door in the lobby. And I thought, that's weird. And I walked on about my way. Well, today, apparently, the dogged reporters on the beat, one Noah Hiles, one Christopher Carter, one Stephen Thompson, all apparently took it upon themselves to find the origin of the said vase. And they inquired with various entities and came away with some sort of explanation that it's a place for players to put their negative thoughts. Each of these gentlemen, fine gentlemen as they are, took pictures of the vase and tweeted them. Noah, I believe, was the first one to get his tweet off. He contended it, and Carter was actually upset. He wanted it known that he also tweeted a photo of the vase, but Noah actually, I checked the timestamps, Noah put it out first. They all mentioned this negative thoughts thing, and it became a big running joke. Most people in Pittsburgh only sort of just said, who cares? You're 1-4. But the national media got a big laugh out of it. Dan Wolken was dunking on it, as the kids would say, as kids like Noah, Carter, and Steven would say. He was dunking on it, and ultimately what it is it's something that's not new. It's something that's been around, since Pat Narduzzi got to Pitt. It's something that was done when he was with Mark D'Antonio. It's something that Jim Tressel apparently carries some part of the origin story here. It's a reference to a book called The Go-Getter. It's some sort of motivational tale of a World War I veteran who comes home and without an arm, he's missing an arm. He's got an arm off, as they say in Shaun of the Dead. And he ends up being put through a series of tasks and challenges to prove that he's capable of doing a job or whatever. And at the end of each task, the objective is to get this blue vase. And so it's like, you don't care what obstacles stand in your way. You're going to get it done by any means, if we want to use that phrase, which is another Pitt phrase this year. But anyway, it just represents putting everything else aside, focusing on your goal, and doing whatever it takes to accomplish your goal. And a friend of the program, Carlo Zavko, former Pitt employee who's no longer on the payroll at the university, said that they had the vase in El Paso last year at the Sun Bowl, and it was very motivating for the players. I heard on Pat Narduzzi's radio show tonight, he said there's blue vases in every room of the facility, which I'm now going to be looking for. I think we all will.
I've never seen them.
I haven't before, but now I'm really curious about looking for this. He says he's got like 2 or 3 in his office. He says that when they went to the Clemson game in 2016, Pat Narduzzi said this on his radio show tonight. When they went to the Clemson game in 2016, they gave each of the players mini blue vases. And when they all left the facility and got on the airplane, they all had a little blue vase in their pocket, which is an interesting backstory, right? So this is not a new thing that when you're 1-4, you put out a little complaint jar in the lobby. It's something they've been doing for a long time, and apparently means something. And there's apparently a video tied to it. Pat Narduzzi described it. They watch it twice a year. They watch it on the Friday night before the first game of the season, and then some other point, and it's an old man telling this story about getting the blue vase and blah blah blah. Anyway, that's the long and short of it. Oh, now at 9:09, I said I could take 2 minutes off. It's now 9:13.
Wow,
that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I think I covered it. Did I leave anything out here?
No. So long story short, what Noah, Steven, and Chris tweeted out something that was inaccurate. Everyone got upset about it, but it's a Wednesday afternoon, and that's all anyone had to talk about.
Right. And like Pitt fans expressed some embarrassment about it. National media gave Pitt a hard time about it. And then Pitt people, former players, former staffers, went on the defensive about it and said, no, this actually means something to us. This is not what you're portraying it to be, and you're wrong. And so it was a big kerfluffle. So to Josh's 2 questions here, blue vase or blue urn, it's a vase. I mean, I've seen it in person. It is a vase. It's not an urn. It'd be a terrible urn because it has no top on it. So all the ashes would fall out. Am I team Noah or team Carlo? I mean, it depends on what sport we're playing, right? Like Noah, I think is a big Dave and Buster's guy. So if we're going to go down there and play like Fruit Ninja, like Noah's my guy. But if we're going to go to Dave and Buster's and shoot hoops,
I would agree.
Carlo might be the guy there. Or like skee ball. I bet Carlo is a big skee ball guy. Carlo Zavko, former Pitt, former Pitt recruiting assistant. So I don't know. Who are you taking? Let's say kickball. Who are you taking? Noah or Carlo?
I'll say Noah.
Noah. Yeah. I feel like shorter guy can get some real leverage, some real torque on the kickball. What about what would you take Carlo in? Flag football? Seems like a quarterback. But Noah seems like the kind of guy.
I think Carlo actually was a quarterback in high school.
Right. Okay, so maybe I would take Carlo as my quarterback in
Yeah.
flag football.
I'd like to take them both to an arcade. I mean, just
Yeah.
settle like men and just play a bunch of arcade games for a couple hours.
Put him through a series of tests and see who can get to the blue vase. I mean, this is what it's about. Who can win? Oh, I bet Noah's good at Guitar Hero. I think he's tweeted a photo of himself playing Guitar Hero. Maybe even a video.
When we go on these like road games and like the night before, like before the game, we go find a bar. He always finds a place with an arcade. So it's not on accident. Like we usually end up at a bar where there's a lot of giant video games everywhere.
That's his thing. Maybe he would take Carlo in like the arcade side, but then like on the basketball, the skee ball, maybe Carlo would be the guy for that. Ring toss, ping pong balls into the goldfish bowls. That's probably like where I would take Carlo. So I mean, I can't just pick a side in general, Josh. It would depend on what we're playing. Voodoo IPA says, I get a break from the oncology unit children's tonight. First of all, salute to you, sir. And your challenge is there, and wish you the best. Enjoying a high ABV beer. Will I need one after Saturday's game? I mean, you'll want one after Saturday's game, win or lose, right? That's I mean, cause of and solution to all of life's problems, right? If it's a loss, you drink your sorrows. If it's a win, you celebrate with a cold one. I mean,
win or lose, still lose.
It all works out. So you're in luck. Let's see. Mark Showju says, I want to say that while I don't always agree with him, I do like Pat Narduzzi, but I have a problem dropping the offense in Cignetti's lap and taking no accountability for the problems it's had. Comments. The thing I would say is this. I don't think Pat Narduzzi, it's hard to say he's not throwing Frank Cignetti under the bus with the offense and the quarterback situation, because it sort of feels like he is. But the only thing I would say is that he has been consistent pretty much since he arrived about being hands-off with the offensive coordinator. You know what I mean? Not demanding that they do something, not saying you got to do this, you got to do that, leaving it to them, letting them do what they want to do, giving them a hard time about it after the season, but not micromanaging that side. And he said it this year, but I think he's been consistent about it from the start. And so would I like to see him take more accountability besides the occasional like obligatory and possibly superficial, it starts with me, I'm the head coach? Probably. The only thing I can say is it's how he has said from the start that he wants to run the program. So it kind of it's okay with me. I'd like to see the head coach have more say over it. I think if the head coach looks at a situation, he says this needs to be fixed, then he needs to walk into the coordinator's office on either side of the ball and say, fix this. Do it the way I want it to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is like it does come off like he is kind of washing his hands of it. And it's like, no, this is Frank's decision. But to play devil's advocate a little bit, it's like, I'm not telling him how to do his job. I trust him. I know what I have total faith in what he's doing. I'm not going to micromanage him. So I think that's how, like, in his head, he's like kind of going about it. But it is still coming off like, well, it's up to, Frank makes the call at quarterback. I'm with the defense the whole time. But I think there is still something to it where he's always let his offensive coordinators run the show. And he's going to continue to do that. So, I mean, this goes back to like everything he's ever said. He's just not the most polished speaker. So he doesn't always it doesn't always come out the way he wants it to come out, I think.
Right. I think he hires a guy who will do things that he would want the guy to do, and then he lets the guy do those things. And I often say that I don't think an athletic director should ever go tell a head coach to fire one of his assistants or one of her assistants. I think that the athletic director hires the head coach to then run the program. And I think Pat Narduzzi tries to take a similar approach with his coordinator. I can't say coordinators, plural, because I don't know if he necessarily does that with the defense. I think he still has a heavy hand in that. But I think with his offensive coordinator, he hires them to run the offense and then lets them run the offense. The only exception I can think of is midway through 2020, after the Notre Dame game, he sort of famously went to Mark Whipple and was like, and the whole offensive staff, and basically demanded data and was like, give me everything you've got on what we do, how we're doing it, what our tendencies are, what's working, what's not. I want to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. But I don't think he's done that. I even asked him earlier this season. I was like, have you done that since then? Have you done that this year? I forget, it was after the West Virginia game, I think. I was like, you did this back in 2020. Have you done this again? He's like, no, I haven't. I try and let, Frank do his thing. It's just how he wants to approach it. I think with something like the quarterback, at some point you have to walk in and say, listen, dude, this is not working. You have to change it. But I want to ask you, I made a big deal about this because I couldn't get it out of my head. What did you think of his comments where he just sort of randomly, or not randomly, but at the mention of Kedon Slovis on Monday, he quickly interjected, I liked Kedon. Kedon was a good player. Did you pick up on anything weird with that little interjection there?
It was weird because he just said it, and whoever was asking the question continued to ask the question, so it didn't really land. It was just like, yeah, I like Kedon. Kedon's a good player, and that was but whoever was asking the question continued to ask, and there was no elaboration, there was no anything on it. But it's very different change of tune from the whole offseason where he wouldn't exactly name Kedon Slovis, but made it clear he wasn't happy with the quarterback's play last year. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it was Will Graves from the Associated Press asking the question, and he was sort of listing all the transfer quarterbacks Narduzzi has gotten. So he's like, Nate Peterman did some good things here, and Narduzzi interjected, he's like, he was really good or whatever. And then Will mentioned Max Brown. Narduzzi didn't say anything. He's like, and then Kedon last year. And that was when he jumped in. And it's a far cry from what he said, in January when he was like, we thought there was a chance we might lose our quarterback. We thought there was a chance we might want to lose our quarterback. Yeah. That's a far cry. And it's a far cry from everything we've heard over the last 11 months, where it's basically been Narduzzi and the players and the program sort of bagging on Kedon Slovis. I just couldn't help feel like the emphasis in that phrase of what he said was, I liked Kedon. Kedon was a good player. I liked Kedon. The obvious sort of unspoken being somebody else didn't like Kedon. And then you can take it further and be like, look what Kedon's doing now. Kedon Slovis is not having a great year. He's not lighting the world on fire at BYU. But you know what he's doing? He's playing average. He's making a few throws, making a few plays. I don't think he's got a ton of. He's got maybe 10 touchdowns.
10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's pretty good.
Right. I mean, if Phil Dracovic had 10 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, Pitt would be 4-1 right now.
Yeah,
I'm serious. I mean, really. I'm not. Cincinnati's a 1-score game. West Virginia, they turned 2 of the 3 interceptions into 10 points, right? So if you, let's say you get, Phil Dracovic has 6 touchdowns, you give him 4 more to spread out. All right, 1 touchdown wins the Cincinnati game. Since West Virginia, if you don't throw 3 interceptions, let's say you only throw 1. You're cutting away some of the points that West Virginia scored. You only need 1 touchdown to win that game. And then Virginia Tech, if you throw 2 touchdown passes in that game, you're holding the ball a little bit longer. Virginia Tech's not running up and down the field on you. If he has 10 touchdown passes, they're 4-1 right now. And again, Kedon Slovis is just okay this year.
Yeah, 59%.
59.
Below the 63.
He's not even 63%. I mean, that's all. Again, that's all we're asking for is just average quarterback play.
Yeah.
All right, there's another super chatter. Who jumped in here? Oh, Willat Harris. Free Brian Brush fan. We're not going to bring the drama of the message boards to here, but you know what? Sometimes, even the best Pitt fans need a timeout from the message boards. So. That's we'll leave it at that. And you know what? I've always said is that no Pitt fan is true. I've always said, and when I first took over the site, or when I first joined the site in 2005, the guy who was running it at that time, Jim Snyder, said to me, he's like, my policy has always been that no Pitt fan is ever permanently banned from the boards. Eventually there'll come a time when everybody can come home. Everybody can eventually come back. And I was like, yeah, that's good. There's a handful of guys though that'll never be back. And I'm not even saying there's anybody who's been on the board recently. There were some people I banned in 2009 or 2011 that no, dude, you're like,
It's
you're not,
it's time to end this.
you just can't function in this environment. Some of the more recent bannings, maybe over the last couple of years, eventually I'll probably let you guys back. But if you reach out and ask, I'll probably do it. But I'm not going out of my way to figure it out. Let's see here. Nico P says, has the lack of success at Pitt / quick turnarounds poked any holes in Pitt's lack of emphasis on the transfer portal? A couple quarterbacks, a tight end, and some whippeal retreads.
I mean, I think they've had some big success with transfers.
I don't think it's a lack of emphasis on the portal. I mean, they brought in offensive linemen a couple of times. Tight end, you go back to Marcus Minor, you were going to mention, I was going to go back to Stefano Millen. You know what I mean? They brought in the kid from Michigan the next year. He didn't do as well. Ryan Jacoby came here as a transfer. Jackson Brown came here as a transfer. They brought in a bunch of quarterbacks, like they mentioned. I mean, they brought in 3 linebackers, right? Kylan Johnson, Tyler Wiltz, and Shane Simon. Multiple defensive backs. Those are the quote whippeal retreads, but MJ Devonshire and Donovan McMillan are playing pretty well. So you take that. They haven't really gone the transfer route with defensive linemen.
Dwayne Hendricks the way back.
Yeah, Dwayne Hendricks back in 15, but that was pre-transfer portal. So,
it was just a transfer.
They brought in Mark Scarpinato that year too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a Michigan State guy. It's the only reason I just remember him because they gave him number 97, and it was 2 years after Aaron Donald left. And I'm like, really, guys? You probably could have held that number back just for a little bit. And then he only played in 3 games anyway. But they haven't really done much with defensive linemen in the last few years. I actually think that's a position they might need to and probably should address this offseason is pass rusher, edge rusher in the portal.
If you had to pick 3 positions, just looking at the roster right now with the seniors, where would you look for the transfer portal first?
Quarterback, D end, receiver.
I'd probably throw a cornerback in there too.
Corner, yeah. Actually, that's a good call. I might even do that ahead of receiver because you have eligibility left with Mumfield and Reynolds, and then all the freshmen. But you don't have what do they even have? I know they have the wide receiver visiting this weekend, taking an unofficial visit for the game on Saturday. They have another receiver committed. I'm drawing a blank right now. I know they lost.
It's Cameron Montero.
Oh, Cameron Montero. That's right. The multi-position athlete. What's he playing now? You do the updates every week. Is he playing quarterback?
Well, he's playing receiver, and his high school team has a freshman quarterback, so he gets the ball 3 times a game. So it's one of those. I think that happened last year. Then they just put him at quarterback.
Yeah, he played quarterback. Right.
He just ran every play. So they might need to do that again.
Is he getting many rushing attempts at least?
No, not really. I mean, it's it's kind of a bad year for his usage. I feel bad playing for a freshman quarterback in your senior year.
Yeah. Will Z wants to know, do we know what Pat Narduzzi's record is out of the bye? I mean, I know we're dealing with the worst Pitt team of the Dews era, but still. Do you know on the record?
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we've probably written about it every year at the bye in the past, but I don't know it right now. We'll have to look. Do I have... They wouldn't have that in the game notes, would they? Let me see.
Let's see. Last year, they lost out of the bye.
Who did they play out of the bye?
The Louisville Cardinals.
Ooh, leave that one out.
They beat Virginia Tech. Bye week, lost to Louisville.
Wow. Bye week. That's rough.
Let's see. They won in 2021. They beat Georgia Tech bye week. Then they beat Virginia Tech.
Okay.
2020, there's a bye week every week.
The whole season was a bye week.
That season doesn't count.
Nope. Trying to see. I don't really remember. I don't have a memory of bye weeks. So
2019 they won. So that's 2-1 out of the last.
I'm not
3.
keeping track.
Yeah. So nothing. I don't know. We'll look and see if it's actually a bigger stat than this.
Yeah.
They won in 2018. So that's 2018, 19, and 21. Oh, okay. So there's a little bit of a track record there.
Okay. Yeah, now I'm curious myself here.
This is great radio.
This is really good live stream as we both sit here looking through 17. They didn't really have a bye week. I mean, they had 9 days off. They guess they played Carolina on a Thursday night, and then I guess the bye week was like, I mean, that's kind of it. But they lost anyway, so that doesn't matter. 16. This is good. I think they had 12 days off before Virginia Tech, and they lost to Virginia Tech. So the number, it's getting worse as we go back through.
They won in 2015. So what, 4-2 or
is that what it is? Well, the Virginia Tech game. Yeah, you're right. Virginia Tech in 15 after losing at Iowa. Anyway, so yeah, no real clear pattern or anything I would draw on. You have any conclusions there, Jim?
No, but yeah, Louisville off the bye two years in a row.
Yep. Let's see. This is here. We'll finish on this question. Mark Sholoju says, "Why did Pitt abandon the style of play they implemented against North Carolina? It was the most productive they've been all year." If he means the style of play from the first half, completing quick, easy passes, like high percentage stuff, I don't think they abandoned it. They just stopped being able to complete them. And to be fair, they really didn't complete them for the 3 games prior to that. And so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that they didn't complete it in the game after that either. It's like, I don't think they were trying to get Phil Dracovic to make difficult passes at the Virginia Tech game. He just only completed 5 in the first 54 minutes. I don't think they abandoned the style. They just weren't good at it. They weren't good at anything. And so, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, and they loaded the box so Pitt couldn't even get those runs going to open up the small passes. And even though Virginia Tech was a bad run defense team, if you put all 10 or 11 guys on the box against Pitt's offensive line right now, down all those starters, they took away the run and they just couldn't even set up that little passing game they had somewhat against North Carolina.
Yeah. Yep. No doubt. I don't, so we'll see. We'll see if Vair can be average, right? If you can just complete the high percentage stuff and try to not suck.
Yeah. Find that blue vase in the end zone.
I mean, it's going to be a thing. I mean, it is a thing now. So I'm wondering, I mean, since Pat Narduzzi talked about it on his radio show tonight, I wonder if he'll talk about it tomorrow during our press briefing, but it's definitely be something I'm going to be watching for. I'm going to be looking in every room in this outside, every room that we're allowed into, although they might make us turn over our cell phones before we walk in so we don't take pictures of it, but I'll be looking for it everywhere. But, all right, Jim, thanks for hanging out. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. It's a lot of fun. As always, we had a good time. And we always have a good time on the post-game show after the game on Saturday night, probably around 11:30 or midnight. We'll go live for the post-game show right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe. And that way you won't miss any of it. And then, of course, head over to the website, Panther-Lair.com. All right, thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Jim, thanks for your participation. You guys have a good rest of the night, good rest of the week. We'll have the morning pit for you tomorrow, and then we will see you on Saturday for the post-game show. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.